This is one of those cases that completely shocked the world. A young girl who had so much life to live, betrayed by the people that were supposed to love and protect her. Maddie Soto just celebrated her 13th birthday the day before she mysteriously went missing. At first, Madeline's mother and stepfather seemed distraught, unsure what happened to their daughter. They spoke to the media and pleaded with the public to help find her. But it wasn't long until people realized that something was off. Their body language and behavior told a completely different story. And shortly after, the truth of what actually happened to Madeline on that day was revealed. Madeline's disappearance quickly turned into a homicide investigation. And after investigators found over 1,500 photos and videos on her stepfather's phone, he became the main suspect. Now, the big question that everyone's still asking themselves is, did Madeline's mother have any involvement in her daughter's death? Did she enable Stefan's actions, or was she completely clueless and innocent? Maddie Soto was born on February 22nd, 2011, to her mother Jennifer Soto and her father Tyler Wallace, but eventually they separated not long after she was born. Madeline stayed to live with her mother in Florida while her father moved to Texas. However, Madeline and her father still spoke and remained in contact. Madeline was described by friends and family as a sweet, intelligent, and curious girl with a love for learning and exploring new things. She was a student at Hunters Creek Middle School in Town Loop Boulevard in Orlando, Florida, and lived in an apartment in Kissimmee with her mother and her mother's longtime boyfriend, 37-year-old Stefan Stearns. Now, Stefan didn't have the most stable life. It was difficult for him to keep a job. He was licensed for a little bit in 2013 as a real estate agent, but he wasn't active for very long. Stefan was constantly running into financial issues and depended on his parents to step in and help him. After jumping from job to job, he finally landed a position at Disney in 2022, but that didn't last too long, and after 1 year, he left, and that again led to more financial issues. His relationship with Jen began in 2017, and just like his career, that also lacked stability. Jen and Stefan were constantly on and off, and with that being said, he was in and out of the home a lot until December 2023, when he finally moved out of the apartment to take a job that his father got for him in Northport in Southwest Florida. But this didn't mean that Stefan was completely out of their lives, because him and Jen were still seeing each other, and he began splitting his time traveling back and forth constantly. Madeline was only 6 years old when Stefan entered her life, and close friends and family described the relationship as friendly and like any other father-daughter type of relationship. However, Madeline's school counselor would later tell a different story. Madeline had made comments weeks leading up to her birthday that her mother's boyfriend was living with them, and she didn't like him because he was weird, he ate all their food, and he would hang around in the living room and made her feel uncomfortable. However, Madeline never disclosed anything further. It was said that from time to time, Stefan helped Jen with tasks regarding Madeline. This included taking her to school in the morning so that Jen could sleep in. Jen would then pick up Madeline after school and take her home. However, it wasn't common for Stefan to take Madeline to school in the morning. In fact, he had only done this a total of 4 to 5 times. But little did anyone know that on February 26th, 4 days after Madeline turned 13, she would never attend school again. Madeline turned 13 years old on Thursday, February 22nd, and celebrated her birthday on Sunday, February 25th at her grandparents' house. Stefan came down to Kissimmee from Northport to see Madeline, which he said she was very excited and happy about. This is the first time Stefan returned from Northport after being away for almost 3 months. However, Madeline's mother, Jen, did not attend her birthday on that day because she was working very late. When Jen arrived home on that Sunday night, she was very exhausted and said goodnight to Madeline before going to bed at 11 p.m. Now, it was common for Jen to make Madeline and Stefan sleep together on the same bed in the same bedroom while she slept in Madeline's bed so that she can get a good night's rest. And that's exactly what happened on the night of February 25th. The next morning, the plan was that Stefan was going to take Madeline to school so that Jen could sleep in. At 4:30 p.m. that afternoon, after Jen got off work, she drove over to Madeline's school to pick her up. But after waiting for some time and attempting to call her, she was told by the school that Madeline never showed up to any of her classes. Right away, Jen began driving home along the same route they normally took together to see if perhaps Madeline decided to walk home. But there was still no sign of her. Jen then drove to her mother's work, also Madeline's grandmother, to look for Madeline there since her office was located not too far from her school. But again, there was no sign of Madeline. Jen then called police and reported Madeline missing at around 8 p.m. on that night. The next day, the Orange County Sheriff Office issued a release to the public about Madeline's disappearance, asking for information about her whereabouts. Immediately, the search for Madeline began, and they had more than 50 members of their emergency response team searching in various areas. While this was going on, Stefan and Jen were interviewed for the first time by Channel 9 in an attempt to ask the public for help. And this interview was eerie, to say the least. People quickly noticed that something was off. Stefan and Jen's behavior and body language was suspicious, and it seemed like they were nervous. Usually, when family members do these types of interviews, they're extremely emotional and desperate to have their loved ones back. But in this specific interview, Jen and Stefan seemed more scared than distraught. But not only that, during some parts of the interview, Jen is seen smiling and giggling. Was that some sort of coping mechanism? I don't know, but what mother is able to smile and look happy during a very scary time like this? It definitely made investigators more suspicious of Jen. Also, when she gave a timeline of what happened on the morning Madeline disappeared, she changed her story multiple times. It almost seemed like she forgot what she just said and couldn't get her story straight. First, she said that on the morning of February 26, Stefan took Maddie to school and she saw what Maddie was wearing and watched her leave the house. But then she changed her story and said that they both took her to school, so which one is it? Investigators found it odd that Jen immediately referred to Madeline in the past tense, insinuating that she already knew she was dead. During this interview, Jen showed a lack of emotions and seemed very detached to her daughter. Stefan, on the other hand, seemed like he tried very hard to show emotion, but it didn't seem genuine because he didn't shed a single tear. At one point during the interview, Stefan was seen behind Jen, pacing back and forth, cracking his knuckles, fidgeting, and to a lot of people, he seemed anxious and nervous. Again, very unusual behavior for someone who's innocent. After this interview with Channel 9, their behavior was analyzed by a body language expert who said that Stefan needed to be looked into more closely. This prompted investigators to interview Stefan again, this time on his own. During this interview, Stefan was asked to go over the timeline of the morning Madeline went missing. He started off with saying that they both woke up at around 7:15, which in his words, it was earlier than usual. And this was because Madeline wanted to have enough time to go to McDonald's before she went to school. Stefan said that on their way to McDonald's, Madeline fell asleep in the car. And when they arrived to McDonald's, she didn't want it anymore. So he continued to drive towards her school. He said that Madeline asked to be dropped off a few blocks away from her school because she was embarrassed to be seen coming out of his car, which he understood and described it as a phase that she was going through. He said that he dropped Madeline off at around 8:40 a.m. at Peace Methodist Preschool, which is a few blocks away from her school, and when she got out of the car, he said, "I love you," and she said it back. He also said that as he was driving off, he watched Madeline through his mirror and he saw her walking towards her school. He also specified this detail that no one asked, but he said that Madeline was going through her backpack as he was driving away, and he just assumed that she was looking for her phone. And this would later be one of the biggest lies that Stefan told. Now, Stefan claimed to have dropped Madeline off at around 8:40, which is pretty early considering she started school at 9:30. But he said that it wasn't unusual and Madeline wanted to meet with some of her friends before she started school on that morning. But the thing that was odd is that during this interview, Stefan tried to be really specific with certain things, kind of like he already had a story in place just in case he was questioned. But little did he know that investigators were 2 steps ahead and already found many inconsistencies with his story. It turns out that everything Stefan said to investigators was a complete lie. They were able to gather multiple surveillance footage showing Stefan doing the complete opposite on the morning that Madeline was supposed to be dropped off at school. Surveillance footage showed that at 7:35 a.m. on February 26, Stefan was clearly seen throwing items into a dumpster at their apartment complex. Come to find out, these items were Madeline's backpack, her school laptop, and one white crock. Now, didn't he say that after dropping Madeline off at school, she was going through her backpack? How is that possible if Madeline never had her backpack with her on that morning? If this is a complete lie, then what else is Stefan lying about? Then at 7:50, Stefan's silver Lincoln is seen at the apartment complex rear gate leaving. Then at 8:19, Stefan is seen returning to the front gate of the apartment complex, and he's seen interacting with the security guard to let him in. Now, let's not forget that at 8:31 a.m., Stefan claimed to have dropped Madeline off at the location near her school, but that was a complete lie because he was later seen on surveillance driving around the apartment complex with Madeline in the car, but she slumped over with her mouth open. At this point, investigators believe that something is wrong with Madeline. Either she's drugged or already dead. During his first interview, Stefan mentioned that Madeline was sleeping on her way to school. But did he say this to cover up that she might have been already dead? Now, this part is crucial. At 9:42 a.m., video surveillance shows Stefan backing into a space at the top level of a parking garage at the Holiday Inn Vacation Club on John Young Parkway in Orange County. Stefan is seen putting a limp body from the passenger seat into his trunk. And this person seemed to be Madeline. Later that afternoon at 1:20 p.m., Stefan said that he got a flat tire near Hickory Tree Road, a location that would later become very relevant. And this was later corroborated by someone who said that they saw a person who fit the same description as Stefan changing a tire on the same road. Lastly, at 2:30 p.m., Stefan was seen again on surveillance at the apartment complex throwing more things in the dumpster. But this isn't the only evidence they have against Stefan. It gets worse. When investigators asked to look through his phone, he agreed, but everything was wiped out. When they asked him why everything was completely wiped out, he explained that he accidentally factory reset his phone on the same morning Madeline went missing. He then said that he tried to update his phone and he accidentally clicked the factory reset button. Now, obviously, that raised more alarm bells because how does someone conveniently erase everything on their phone on the same day their child goes missing? But thankfully, it didn't really matter because investigators were still able to recover things on his phone. And after they found out what was on that phone, it was clear why Stefan erased everything. Stefan was confronted on February 28th when investigators found more than 1,500 disturbing videos and photos of Madeline on his phone. These videos and photos reveal that Madeline was being abused by her stepfather, and it all dates back to 2022 when Madeline was only 11 years old. Stefan was arrested and charged with a total of 60 charges, including 8 counts of battery on a child under 12, 5 counts of sexual battery with a child 12 to 18, 7 counts of lewd and lascivious molestation, and 40 counts of unlawful possession of materials depicting performance by a child or more images. After his arrest, police believe that Stefan knew more information regarding Madeline's disappearance, but at this point, Stefan refused to speak to investigators and requested an attorney. But Stefan's perversion doesn't end there. When investigators looked through his phone, they saw a folder with photos of 2 naked women. Unsure of who these women were, investigators found out that Jen was renting her house to 2 other women. It turns out that Stefan was spying and taking photos and videos of these roommates through a crack on their door. While police gathered more evidence and contacted family and friends, they spoke to a woman who identified herself as Stefan's ex-girlfriend and said that she stopped speaking to Stefan after he told her that he slept with Madeline. She told police that Stefan justified this behavior by saying that he needed to cuddle her for Madeline to fall asleep. But what he said next to his ex-girlfriend is disgusting. He said that one day while sleeping next to Madeline, he woke up on that morning and he had an erection. Again, this child was put in such a harmful and vulnerable position. Who in their right mind would think it's okay and appropriate to have a grown man sleeping with a child? Shortly after, Madeline's mother was interviewed by investigators, and they were not prepared to see her lack of emotions towards her daughter. And keep in mind, this interview took place shortly after videos and photos were shown to her of Stefan abusing her daughter. You would think that she would be losing it and angry at Stefan, but that wasn't the case. Instead, Jen kind of shrugged it off and said that Stefan's abuse wasn't considered evil, basically insinuating that just because Stefan was sexually abusing Madeline, it doesn't mean he took her life. I think everyone was taken aback by this statement because how is this mother still defending this man who was abusing her daughter for years? It was clear that despite Jen seeing all the proof right in front of her and knowing that Stefan was lying, she was still not going to stop protecting him. You see, it will later be revealed that Jen seemed to turn a blind eye and possibly enable the abuse. She said it herself. She told Madeline and Stefan to sleep together in the guest bedroom while she slept alone in Madeline's bed. And it was no different the night before Madeline went missing. What caught investigators off guard is that the guest bedroom had a chain lock installed on the inside of the door, and they found a handgun on the side where Stefan slept on that nightstand. Now, I don't know what parent would think it's slightly appropriate to allow their daughter to sleep next to a grown man in the same bedroom and the same bed. I just don't understand. But Jen's enabling didn't stop there. During this interview, investigators were shocked when at one point, Jen admitted that she told Stefan to get a lawyer when he became the main suspect. A normal parent would be angry and want absolutely nothing to do with the person responsible for the child's disappearance. But in this case, Jen again tried to protect Stefan. It was clear that at this point, she was either extremely naive to think that Stefan was still innocent, or she was helping him cover up the crime. Her original statement to police on the morning Madeline went missing also changed drastically. Jen went from stating that she saw Madeline before she left for school. She said that she watched her get dressed, she knew what she was wearing, and she saw her leave the front door. But she would later change her story, and in fact, she didn't do any of these things. Jen later admitted that she thought she saw Madeline, she thought she heard her, but in reality, she only saw Stefan. How can someone be so specific about what they saw and then completely take it back? What's also quite alarming is that Jen did not show much emotion towards Madeline, which at this point, she was missing for 5 days. Instead, she began crying uncontrollably when she realized that her birthday was the next day, and she said that it was going to be the worst birthday ever. Jen was more focused on whether she was going to have a good birthday and cried more about this than she did in the last 4 days. It's clear that Jen's decision-making as a mother was very questionable, and her behavior during the investigation was suspicious, which led people to speculate that she knew more or she was involved in Madeline's disappearance. Stefan's parents, Chris and Deborah Stearns, also spoke to police and told them that they believe that Jen did something to Madeline. They made it clear that they did not approve or support their son's relationship with Jen and believe that her mental state, due to her taking so much medication for anxiety and other issues, made her a bad influence for their son. They claimed that Jen was sharing drugs with Stefan, which made him erratic and unpredictable, and that she was spiraling and she was taking Stefan down with her. Finally, after 4 days, and shortly after Jen's last interview with detectives, Madeline was found around 4:30 p.m. in a wooded area along Hickory Tree Road. Her body was laying near a line of bamboo trees less than 100 feet from the road where Stefan was seen with a flat tire on the morning Madeline disappeared. Officers who first saw her said she was wearing a green hooded sweatshirt, blue jeans, and her body was covered with pieces of hay or dry grass. The autopsy revealed that Madeline's cause of death was strangulation. However, they still don't know whether Madeline was murdered on the night of her birthday celebration or the next morning before she went to school. But it's clear that Madeline put up a fight because when Stefan's body was examined, they found various scratches and marks all over his hands and arms, which showed that Madeline tried to fight back. However, Stefan said that these scratches came from changing his tire on the morning Madeline disappeared, but we don't know if that's true or not. He could have said that so he would have have been excused if they found scratches and marks on his body, which they did. Stefan was indicted in April for Madeline's murder, and he pleaded not guilty for sexually abusing and murdering her. His trial for the murder is set for September 2025 and faces the possibility of the death penalty if convicted. Now, before he goes on trial for Madeline's murder, he will be tried for the sex crimes. And again, he faces 60 counts in total of sexual battery and possession of child. Now, in regards to Jen, she hasn't been charged for any crimes at this point. Since this case became nationwide, there are still so many unanswered questions. And these doubts are not just regarding Stefan, but also Madeline's mother, who in many instances failed to protect her daughter. How could her mother be okay with her underage daughter sleeping next to a grown man? Did Jen really knew about the abuse that was going on, or was she completely oblivious to it? Or did panic just set in when she found out what happened to her and she helped Stefan cover up the crime? Again, these are all things that we don't know at this point. However, it's clear that we still have so much to uncover in this case. Now, Stefan, on the other hand, has proved time and time again that he was intentionally hurting Madeline way before her murder, which ultimately made him the main suspect and put him in jail. Like I said, there are still so many mysteries in this case that we will only get answers to during the upcoming trial. Now, what we do know, and I hope we learn from this case, is that parents need to set strict boundaries with their kids and the adults they decide to bring into their lives. It's important that children understand what's appropriate and what's not. And with that being said, children should always feel like they can speak up and confide in someone so that situations like this can be avoided. We've seen many cases similar to this one, but this case has reminded us that we can't trust everyone, especially with our kids.